Okay, thanks, Duncan. Over to you.
Thanks, Kim. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our onshore wind event, sponsored by Renantis. I'm Duncan Law, Head of Policy and Advocacy at Community Energy England, and thank you for joining us. We're really glad you're here, and we hope you find today's conference interesting and informative and stimulating, whatever stage of the community energy journey you're at, or whatever brings you to this onshore wind-focused event. There will be an opportunity to connect with each other and learn, and your inputs and insights in the discussion section and the question and answer will definitely shape Community Energy England's work and priorities for the year ahead, especially in our onshore wind. For those who aren't familiar with Community Energy England, it is the membership network and representative body for the community-led and owned energy organisations around the country. We exist to help community energy organisations connect with each other, overcome barriers and share learning. And we also advocate on behalf of the sector with a strong track record, reaching central government and other stakeholders to inform and influence them about community energy. And we continue to keep pressure up on the government to better support the amazing work you do. We responded to the recent consultation on opening up onshore wind, thanks to those who input and did their own responses and have written to their MPs recently. We joined with Possible and others to sign joint letters and have written to ministers, joined panel discussions, and lots more. We want, in general, to help upskill and upscale the sector to do more of your vital work. In a few minutes, I'll explain the format of today's event, but first, a few bits of housekeeping for the event. Supporting today's event, we've got Kim, who's managing the Zoom, and we have our three facilitators from CEEM, the panel, who will be leading the discussions in the breakout rooms later on, and Lisa, Emma, and Jess, as part of the support team, who will be in the breakout rooms taking detailed notes as well, doubtless as contributing to the discussion. If you're unsure of anything today, please stick a message in the chat and one of the teams will get back to you. You might also like to stick your name and organisation in the chat so that we have a record of exactly who's here. We'll be breaking in discussion groups at around 1:15, but before then we have our experts giving insights into onshore wind, giving us a reality check and looking at ways forward. Our first speakers will be Dave Tudgey and Charles Gamble from Ambition Community Energy in Bristol, who will be giving us an introduction and the reasons why community energy organisations should be harnessing onshore wind projects, and they have an amazing story to tell. Then John Malone from Energy for All, who brings the experience of doing community-led wind from before it was made extremely difficult in 2015, and he has consulted other members, including Mike Blanche of Westmill Wind Co-op. And he'll be doing a reality check, what we need to think about in order to go into doing onshore wind with our eyes wide open. And then finally, we'll be hearing from Erin Murchie from who is Community Relations Manager at Renantis, which was previously Fulk Renewables, who've worked with Energy for All for many years and have kindly sponsored this event. And she'll talk about how they can support community energy to do more wind. Now, we're expecting to finish by 2 p.m. And we will do our best to keep to time. Before I hand over to our first speakers, Dave and Charles, I will give a bit of context. But first, before that, we'd like to run a quick poll to see if those here today have a definite ambition to do wind, and if so, what scale of project you're looking at. This will be useful to know before our breakout sessions later on, which will be divided according to scale. So Kim will launch the poll now, and if you have an ambition to do wind, please let us know what scale. Large, which is above 3 megawatts, including wind farms; medium, smaller than 3 megawatts; small, below 50 kilowatts, or, oh my goodness, I don't know. While you're filling that out, it's gone live. While you're filling that out, we'll move on to a bit of an introduction from me to the background to the event and onshore wind in England, and then we'll move on to the speakers. So could I have the next slide, please? So today we're bringing together, so the question is, why wind, why now, and what is the context? Well, we know onshore wind is the cheapest renewable energy, essential to achieving net zero targets by 2050, and also to the government achieving their own ambitions of a net zero grid by 2035. The policy history, again, you probably know this, the Conservative government effectively banned onshore wind in 2015 by introducing impossible constraints on planning. That's in England only. So most wind happened in Scotland and Wales, and the pipeline in England dwindled to something like 200 megawatts. Although that is, well, no, the pipeline is climbing, but it's mostly in Scotland. So in 2022, the British Energy Security Strategy promised to consult on developing local partnerships for a limited number of supportive communities who wish to host new onshore wind infrastructure in return for benefits, including lower energy bills. That is still going ahead, and there will be a consultation very soon, we'll let you know, on how communities and local authorities can demonstrate support. Then, with various changes of government, they promised to open it up, and then they promised not to. And finally, we have a recent consultation on reforming planning, but the proposals therein still allow local authorities to block and require them to designate areas, which is all extremely counterproductive. But we think this is moving in one direction, and that is towards ultimately wind being opened up. The support for wind is high across the country. Government figures show 70% supportive of wind and higher than average support among Tory voters. So the renaissance, the onshore wind renaissance will happen. There will be an election in 2024-25. And if we start preparing now, it takes a long time, we'll be ready when it's allowed. So just a quick glance at why it's a good idea. It's the cheapest energy per megawatt hour, should be per megawatt hour generated. It can be fairly quick compared with old style energy generation. And it is a big step up in potential size of projects for community energy. Additionally, of course, it enables higher earnings and a bigger community benefit to accrue. The sector is active in many areas of good wind potential. 190 organizations are active within 10 areas of identified good wind potential, and we will be producing a more detailed map than this one that you see in the slide to enable you to actually do some identifying of particular areas local to you. There's good potential for shared ownership. It's already happening in Wales. Local authorities may be interested in this scale of energy to decarbonize their own operations. And in many cases, low-cost power will enable other things like heat network projects and transport. Next slide. And so the spirit of this event is that we want to be can-do. We have a brilliant example of a project that has happened at a time when it was deemed impossible by even commercial developers, and they have another project planned in Liverpool and more beyond that. Many organizations who were involved before 2015 are still enthusiastic, still have projects in the pipeline, and there are 100 people registered for this event. But we need to have our eyes wide open. It takes lots of time and money. Planning is still potentially difficult. So it's important that we identify viable projects. We get the community on side, which we're good at. We get grid connections, which is problematic, and that we don't stumble at any foreseeable hurdles. And that's why we have the amazing panel that we have today, who I will hand over to very immediately. A big priority for the event is also to identify a plan for the sector and for community energy to get ready and resourced to make a success of it. and that will be part of the discussion in the breakout rooms. What do you need to make it happen in your community? So now I'll hand over to Dave Tudgey and Charles Gamble of Ambition Community Energy and Community Solutions in Bristol to tell their story. Dave, Charles.
Thank you. I'm just about to share my screen. You can allow us to do that. Allow us to share. You have to share your screen. And everyone see the screen?
Yes.
I'll just briefly introduce myself, and David's going to take the first few slides, and then we're going to go through a very brief outline of what we've done in it. So my name is Charles Gamble. I'm co-director and founder with David of Power Solutions. I've been in business for 2.5 decades or something, off and on. And this has been one of the most interesting and challenging projects, one of the smallest that we've involved in.
Can I just say, Charles, the sound is very muffled. Is there a way that you can speak perhaps more directly towards the microphone for the clarity of the recording?
I'll say that again, a bit more clearly, perhaps. Charles Gamble, I've been in the spin business for 2.5 decades, and like to be working with David Tudgey. We're going to give you a very short description of the project that we just completed in David. David, would you like to introduce yourself?
So yes, my name is David Tudgey. I also work for Bristol Energy Network, and I've been working with Ambition Northwest since 2014. This project really is beginning. I want to introduce this slide. Sorry, Charles.
Okay. Project that we just completed is machine you see on the screen here. It's an Enercon E115E3, 4.2 megawatts on a 92-meter tower. Tip height 150 meters, important for planning experience. Civil works began July last year, and it will be operational in a few weeks.
Charles, I'm sorry to interrupt again. We're getting feedback in the chat that it's very difficult to hear half your words. So I don't know if there's anything you can do about the microphone, but if not, if you could just speak quite slowly and quite clearly, we'll give you a little bit of extra time, but it's important that we hear all the words. Thanks.
Sorry about that. I do tend to have a bit of a Geordie accent. And this is our turbine, which is just completed. You can see on the screen what it is. It's taken us since 2016 to get there, and I will go through some of the steps in the process in the next slide. I'll now hand over to David.
Okay, can you give me some noise if you can hear my voice? Can you hear my voice?
It's just a bit breaking up and intermittent. It's it's the connection, not the accents. Somebody has
sure,
said.
that's our internet connection. I'm not sure. So should I continue, or should we let someone else speak and we come back in a bit? So
That's better now, Dave. We can
Is
hear
it better?
you better now. Yeah.
Okay, so all right, well I'll continue. You can actually hear me. I'll continue that voice out.
It's less muffled at the moment, so we'll carry on for the moment.
It's all good. Okay. So yeah, so basically 6 years ago, well 7 years ago, most of the day, because my son was born on the 27th of March, we submitted the last of the remaining new set of funding, which is basically the beginning of this project back in 2016 March. So basically what we initially were doing was identify groups for onshore wind, given the written ministerial statement. I guess what summarised what we found is that if you can demonstrate that the site is suitable and that the community support, then you can meet the spirit of the written ministerial statement of your onshore wind projects. We have obviously recommended changes to the ministerial statement, which actually allow it much more easier to bring onshore sites, particularly in more challenging political environments where you have a more aggressive anti-political response. Locally to us, we're fortunate that we have very much a supportive local authority for Onshore, and hence why we've been successful. There are 7 stages that are really required in order to achieve planning. Those are set out here. It's community, and that's vital for the community finance. There's ambition and request to get together a team, which includes Professor Anthony Gary and other fantastic people that help this project come what it is. But planning is obviously critical, making sure that your planning officers understand what we're trying to achieve, and then making sure that you've got joined up finance. Now, the reason why I would say that our project took as long as it did is actually getting the funding available. So effectively, there was no development finance available to us. We had to stitch together grants we were identifying to actually.
Dave, I'm sorry to interrupt again. We really aren't getting enough of your speech for this to be useful. Is there a way you can dial in? Have you got headphones? Can you just check that there isn't a second microphone live? There isn't another computer that's connected in.
Sure. So we can import and do it on a different laptop if that makes
If we talk clearly, I suspect because these are brand new offices, that broadband isn't what it's made out of.
If you've got headphones and if you could maybe drop the camera, that might help the bandwidth. I'm really sorry to be interrupting like this, but it's such valuable stuff that we do need the words.
Right, we'll turn off the video on our side as long as you can still see the.
That suddenly is much clearer.
Much better.
Haven't done anything unless you've turned this one off.
It's off already. Are we actually coming through clearly now? Is that
Yes,
clear?
But I think
I don't know what happened, but something happened. But
turn off the camera, please, because I think we need all the bandwidth we can get.
Great. I'll let you do that.
Would you mind just starting that slide again, just because we've missed a lot of it? So that would be.
Okay, let me begin again. So effectively, this project began in 2016 on the 27th of March, which was the final deadline for the USEF submission, Urban Community Energy Fund, then the DEC, now DESNES, whatever it's called now. So effectively that allowed us enough funding to be able to explore the legal routes for onshore wind, given the written ministerial statement, and we concluded that we could proceed if we were able to demonstrate that there was enough community support and that we cited the turbine correctly and demonstrated that we considered all of the constraints for the site appropriately, and that's effectively why we went ahead and got planning permission, because we're also in a political environment which is supportive of onshore wind. Now, what obviously needs to happen is a change in policy to support onshore wind across the whole country, because obviously just because we're lucky of our local support for onshore wind politically, that might not be the case where you are. But what we would really urge you to do today is to actually do the community engagement and do the site searches from today. I think finance is tricky, and it was one of the things that held us back the longest was identifying the correct financial mechanisms, the development finance to enable us to develop our project. And another critical element is making sure you've got PPA and also making sure you've got grid access. But the key thing is that you can get started on this today, even if you're not in a particularly good political environment at the moment. Things will change, we believe, and so I'll go to the next slide. Did you catch any of that at all? Did it come across? So yeah, so these are the 7 vital things that you need to be able to develop onshore wind, and without these 7 things, you'll struggle to go forward. So I'll let go to the next slide. Yeah.
get out of that. Okay. Still talk about community here.
Yeah, so really evidencing your community support. We did that through community surveys, which also fed into community plans and okay. So yeah, so just in making sure when you're engaging the community, you're engaging them about issues they're concerned about, and encouraging them about the real benefits that onshore wind projects can bring through the revenues and profits from the project. And in the photo here, you can see Ambition Lawrence Weston, who can really, who again were really encouraging us to develop this project on their behalf, because they were surrounded by onshore wind turbines already. So obviously, there's a lot of people would say that that there's a lot of anxiety about onshore wind, but those communities with onshore wind are comfortable with the turbines that are there, and the idea that they can actually own the turbine themselves is a real encouragement. And that's a way to go, really, is just to work with the community on their priorities and show them how they can do that, be part of it in that way.
Okay, thank you, David. I've just a few more slides. I'm aware of the time. There are many aspects to cover, and then can be covered even in this complete session. I'm sure a few will come up in Q&A and in the chat rooms. The logistics is a big issue. We're very fortunate we are only a few miles from a port. It is an enormous issue, literally. There were 25 large loads, each needing police escort. They all got there in 3 days. This is a picture of a blade, 56.6 meters long. Don't touch it. 80-ton tower sections, and this is 4 miles from a major port. If you're in the middle of the hills, this is one of the important things to think about. Obviously, all the turbines are imported because it's in euros. Turbines, however, are in serial production. They are commercially available. They are almost commodities. They have high availability, and they do what they say on the tin. You need to have a big one. Smaller than 100 meters diameter is probably not available in, there are turbines at 1 megawatt which are smaller, but in the sector that we're interested in, 3 megawatt scale turbines, you can't buy one now that's smaller than 100 meters. You need to be as high as possible. So a planning issue will be a tip height. And I understand in Scotland, and someone will correct me, some permitting is being provided at 250 meter tips. Transportation, as I've talked about, is an issue. Very few manufacturers are interested in a single machine, very few. And as I said, it's only available in euros. This should start a short video. Please tell me that it does. Yes, it does. This is a drone shot before the turbine was put there. You can see in the bottom of the picture, we'll go back in a second, the foundation mat, as we just pull back here. That's 1,100 tons of concrete, 100 tons of steel. There's a lot of work and cost goes into this, and planning and detail. There are our substations. You can see beyond that, there are 4 areas where we had to pile in order to enable the construction crane to carry the loads. You can see the area of the site, the cabins, the track, the distance we had to place the turbine from the road in order to lay down this very long crane. Next one is, this is a picture of the site just after the first tower section has been erected. You can see the 3 blades, 3 tower sections on the ground, stator, rotor, hub, and other parts. It's a very busy and tight site because of the compact nature of the site. There was a lot of work involved in making this happen. And I think I'll hand over to David to conclude now. I think we've overshot our 10-minute budget.
Yes, so just to conclude then, really, that it is complex and it does take time to identify a site and get that site in place. And it does take a lot of resource to actually undertake all the surveys needed to achieve planning permission. So it's really important to think about the scale of your turbine to make sure it's going to actually be able to cover all of those planning costs, and also give you a good return. Because the reason why we chose such a large turbine wasn't because we wanted the biggest and the best. It was really to meet the financial real world that we're in right now, which is a subsidy-free world. So you have to really build your turbine to actually make sure that it actually will cover all of its costs and be able to be profitable even when power prices are lower. So you can't change, you can change everything, but you can't change the wind. So making sure that you've got a windy site is really important, and just building that community engagement up as you're developing your project is vital to achieving the project. So yeah, if you want, obviously in Bristol, as Bristol Energy Network, we've been awarded 1.5 million to begin doing 10 projects, identifying 10 suitable sites and bringing forward 3 turbines over the next 3 years. If you want to look at how we're going about that, do get in touch with Community Power Solutions in terms of how you might actually engage with your local authority to do that. But that's all for us for now. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dave and Charles. That was amazing. And I think we all should absolutely celebrate the fact that you've achieved, in a time when it was impossible, the largest single turbine in the UK that will be generating 4.2 megawatts and large amounts of community benefit for Lawrence Weston community. And there we have it. Plans for 10 more as well, so do get in touch. So now I'd like to hand over to our next speaker, John Malone from Energy for All, who will be bringing us a reality check, more of a reality check, a checklist as well, I hope. John. I think if John is to share, we have to unshare our screen.
I think, John, you're on mute. Sorry, I think I've got your slides though.
Oh, great.
I'll just mute.
Yeah, thank you. I am on mute. That was an error. So you've missed the exciting introduction. It's John Malone from Energy for All. I'm Development Director with Energy for All. Following Dave and Charles with all that exciting news, to do a reality check is a bit of a grim prospect, but I think it's important that we do look at some of the points that Dave had started to raise in terms of the challenges. And just to say, Duncan, Mike Blanche has prepared these slides. BVG Associates are a consultancy. Mike's got long experience in wind energy development. He's an advisor to Westmill Wind Board, which is one of the Energy for All cooperatives. We were going to do this as a double act, but Mike's unavailable this morning. Duncan keeps calling us experts, and I'd like to just say that I'm uncomfortable being labelled as an expert, as I'm very aware of my shortcomings, and I'm sure I've got shortcomings I'm not even aware of. But what's important for me is that community and cooperative energy is a collective endeavour. So we help each other out through our shortcomings and work together to try and deliver these projects. And it's with that in mind that we're Energy for All are trying to work with communities to deliver wind energy amongst other projects. So if there's any particular questions you want to follow up on, do feel free to get in touch. So just looking at my first slide, I think the warning is, and I think we saw that from Dave and Charles' information, it can take quite a long time. There are many difficulties to overcome, and embarking on a community wind energy project needs careful consideration. Duncan's alluded to the planning difficulties. Things may improve. Dave will call us to push our MPs and push the legislators to improve the situation if we're really going to see a scale up in community wind. But at the moment, things can be pretty tricky. So, and additionally, then there is the question of how you make a project viable. So the actual support mechanisms are not currently there. and actually making the finances stack up is something that you need to pay very careful attention to before embarking on the projects. I wanted to add a little bit of colour to that, really, given some of the experience that Energy for All has had. We have a co-op called Four Winds, and Four Winds has constructed 2 single 500 kilowatt wind turbines and operates those turbines in South Yorkshire and in Derbyshire. They're in a wind speed of about 6 meters per second average wind speed, and when they were set up, they received a 15 pence per kilowatt hour.
She's stalked me.
15 pence per kilowatt hour feed-in tariff and 5 pence per kilowatt hour electricity export price. So about a 20 pence per kilowatt hour income for the energy generated. Those kind of numbers are not available for that scale of project now. So we have to think very, very carefully about how we generate enough income to cover projects which will now likely cost more in terms of the install and the capital costs. It can be quite tricky to secure the necessary income to cover the project costs, as Dave's alluded to earlier. Do you want to just jump to the next slide, please? These slides are to be made available, I think. So some of the information, there's quite a lot of detail. I don't intend to talk through it all, but Dave did set out their view of the process of delivering the wind farm, and here's another view of the development process with an indication of the time frame. Those time frames are realistic and indicative if things move particularly well for a large wind energy project, but things can actually
John, you've frozen for me.
Oh, he's back, I think.
Can you go back to things can ...
They can take longer, so the tenacity and resolve is needed to get through what is quite a long process to get from the concept through to delivery of a wind energy project. I think Dave's time frame is not unusual, really. Westmill Wind, again referring to that 6.5 megawatt project, the landowner there who we worked with, Adam Twine, I think it was in 13 or 14 years to get through the process of actually delivering that project. So things can take a disproportionately long period of time. Next slide, please. There's an indication of some of the costs associated with the development phases for a large wind farm project. I'm not going to go into those details. We can pick them up in the chat, and I'm happy to discuss these with people at any time. I think the point I wanted to pick out there is the funnel. Mike's suggesting that expect consent for only 1 in 12 sites, which is quite an attrition rate that we have to bear in mind. Community groups may only have 1 site to go at, so that's a real risk. And Dave and Charles have alluded to the fact of trying to look at 10 sites and maybe deliver 3, which is still a good success rate. Our experience of trying to take 13 single turbine sites through planning during the feed-in tariff period across different areas in the UK, in the end, 2 of those projects have been built. 3 were consented, but 1 was consented way after the feed-in tariff had closed, and we couldn't actually deliver that financially. So out of 13 projects in the starting blocks, 2 projects came through in our single turbine work in that 2010 to 2015 period. Next slide, please. So when looking for a site, there are a range of things that you need to consider listed there, and I think again this is detail that we need to figure out collectively as a CEE in a community energy sector, how we help people to address these issues. So I think that's something for further discussion, but I don't intend to go through those now, but we can take questions. And then next slide, please. And then once you're through the site identification and into the design and planning stage, it may be that expertise is needed to be brought in, and that adds to the cost of delivery for a community group. I referenced some of the costs on an earlier slide, and part of that is bringing in the necessary experts to address the various issues that need to be reported on for the planning process and for the design process outlined here. But again, chance to discuss hopefully during the Q&A or during the breakout groups. I think I'm nearly through there. Just on scale, a couple of other observations to make. Let me just get to my, so Four Winds Community Energy, which is the co-op I mentioned earlier, have got 2 single wind turbines, 500 kilowatts each. The cost of those turbines was £2 million, so a cost of £4 million per megawatt to install, essentially. High Winds Community Energy, which is a 2 times 2.3 megawatt site that Energy for All supports in Cumbria, the install cost there was 3 million a turbine, so 1.3 million per megawatt. So the economy of scale between a 500 kilowatt turbine costing 4 million per megawatt, £2 million per turbine, compared to a 2.3 megawatt turbine, which essentially costs 1.3 million per megawatt, is clear. So bigger is better, but that doesn't always mean that bigger is easier to deliver, but as things stand, bigger is better given the economics of the current economic situation in terms of trying to deliver a viable project. So that there's more information we can share, but that was trying to fit some relevant information into the 10 minutes we've allotted. So thank you, Duncan.
Thank you, John. That was amazing. And yes, those slides will be available, and it might be worth the conveners of the discussion groups having them available on there to share in the discussion groups in case anybody wants to discuss anything particular about them. So I would like now to hand over to Erin from Renantis, and Renantis have kindly sponsored today's event, previously Falk Renewables, and Renantis has worked as an onshore wind developer with Energy for All for over 14 years, been involved in 7 cooperative projects delivering 8 wind farms, including the famous Fintry turbine. And they were also involved in an early project to supply discounted electricity to residents, and continue to work towards this goal. Keen to support community energy onshore wind with practical help, which Erin will now talk to. Erin, thank you. You're still on mute, I'm afraid.
Sorry about that. That was a rookie error. I'm Erin Murchie from Renantis, as what you said, formerly Falk Renewables. We were formed in August 2002, so over 20 years of experience in the UK. We built our first wind farm at Cefn in Wales in 2004, and since then we've built 11 other wind farms in the UK, including 10 in Scotland, 1 in East Yorkshire. And in total, our global installed capacity is 1.4 gigawatts of wind and solar. As Dave alluded to, community is paramount for us. Renantis has pioneered community engagement and ownership in the UK renewable markets. This has included various innovative benefit and ownership schemes offered to local communities, including trust funds, discounted electricity bills, as Duncan mentioned, and community turbine and cooperatives. We're always keen to help local communities and individuals where possible, and we try to be flexible in our response to requests for assistance. We support projects for young people. It's one of our top priorities for community benefit funds, as well as our annual student support scheme. And the annual student support scheme is, as I say, run annually, and it's for students who are based around the wind farms in the UK. So for each of our 12 UK wind farms, we pay money into a trust fund to benefit the local community. In this way, we have distributed 1.13 million to local communities through 17 community trusts. We also try to make our wind farms part of communities in which they're located. Groups of local school children and other community groups are regularly come to the wind farm, and we actively encourage this. And our engineers give talks on wind energy to schools, and of course are on site when we have site visits. We also involve local communities at the earliest opportunity when we plan a new wind farm and consult with them at every stage of development and operation. For each of our projects, we set up a construction liaison group and a website to make sure local people are involved when the wind farm is being built, and we can let them know about any issues, and they can also let us know about any issues which may concern them. This also helps to foster links in the community and helps to address and allay any concerns during construction period. Next slide, please. So moving on to our cooperative model, we've worked, as John mentioned, we've worked for Energy for All since 2006, and in that time we've set up 7 cooperatives for 8 of our Scottish wind farms. The scheme's designed to allow local people to buy a stake in their local wind farm, investing from £250 up to £20,000. In Renantis' case, the co-op purchases a share of the project and members receive an annual return on their investment, and at the end of the co-op life, their initial investment is returned. Some of the profits also provided go to local community benefits. We've currently over 3,600 investors in the co-ops, investing over £11 million, and the co-ops have distributed over £6 million in dividends. Next slide, please. Now, our Earlsbourne wind farm in Stirlingshire, when we were looking to build it in 2006, we were approached by a Fintry community who had looked into building their own turbine. They realised that it was beyond them in terms of funding. So Renantis agreed to fund, operate and maintain a community turbine for Fintry Renewable Energy Enterprise, which is known as FREE. 1/15 of the production of the wind farm goes to FREE. This money was used to pay back the loan for the turbine over a period of 15 years. And the remainder of the money went to local communities to pay for sustainable projects. FREE will shortly be completing their loan repayments on the production sharing agreement at Earlsbourne. And then all money from that turbine will go directly into the community. At the time that the wind farm was built, the people of Fintry expected to make about £900,000 over the first 15 years while they paid off the cost of the 115-metre turbine. Then roughly 4 million during the next years. And this is all very much dependent on the price of electricity. Next slide, please. So this is really what we can do to help communities. Renantis, as a community partner, can provide well-tailored solutions for your site, project finance. We can discuss technical aspects with you and basically manage the process from inception to operation. We've specialists here who are happy to help speak to you about any concerns that you might have. And yeah, we're just, as I say, looking to help where we can, and be very happy for anybody to get in touch with us. Sorry, I think I kind of flew through that, but if you have any questions, please get in touch with me. I'd be happy to help you. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Erin. That was interesting and inspiring, and interesting to note that there are partners that communities can go to help make it happen once they've identified a site, and also that you, with your experience, say that engagement with the community is vital and productive and worth doing, and that is obviously something, a real role for community energy organisations, even if they don't feel they can build a 4.2 megawatt turbine or wind farm. Brilliant. So first of all, I would like to ask the panel if they have any quick reflections on what other speakers have said or presented, anything to add, even contradict or argue with. So I'll start with Charles and Dave. Have you got any comments on what the other panelists have said?
I think we're in general agreement. I think it basically takes a lot of work to identify suitable sites for wind, and that's a good time to start looking now. Things are changing, and that well, it's not conducive at the moment. I do believe change is on its way. So we're just encouraging communities to start, talking to local councillors and parish councils about available land they might be able to start exploring. And then when things change, then there's support there from these partners that have been discussed on the panel today.
Brilliant.
If I may just add, I thought it was very interesting that, and I agree that the size of a turbine and the cost per megawatt is important, both in the construction phase and in the revenue operational phase. And interesting presentation from Renantis. I think the construction liaison group is a very good idea. We kind of did that on an ad hoc basis. Principally, David, it worked very well, but formalized, that's a good thing. Also, of course, we at Ambition Community Energy, it's a very different financial model to what Erin described. There are many ways to the top of this particular mountain. So interesting to compare those ideas. Thank you.
Brilliant. John, any reflections?
Yeah, I think just a couple. I'm going back to Dave and Charles talking about now having funding to look at a portfolio of sites, which I think is a really positive way forward. Preparation now, as Dave's saying, for a change coming down the track, so that some or all of those sites can be delivered is a really positive move. And then I think Erin made it clear that there are developers, Renantis being one of the leaders, who will work with communities to try and get the best out of larger projects for the community. So I think where communities should have ambition in terms of scale of their own projects, 100% community owned projects, but there is a step that there are sizes of projects which might be a step too far for communities, but they shouldn't give up there. They should look for the right partner to try and take those projects forward.
Brilliant. Yeah, agree with all of that. Erin, do you have any reflections?
No, really just to confirm what Charles and David said is, communities are paramount in this, and working with them is really important. Right from inception, all the way through, so that they're aware of what's going on. Again, as we say, we've worked with Energy for All. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, John, I think we're the only developer who has more than one co-op with Energy for All. We have the 7 from 8 wind farms.
Yeah.
So it's all about communities. It's working with them. It's not always easy. Some communities are much easier to work with than others. Some just aren't interested. So it rolls its roundabouts, swings and roundabouts. But it's important to engage with the communities right from the very start.
I'd just like to add one thing really about the community that we've worked on behalf of in Norwich Western. It's one of the communities that's really been left behind for many years, and the individuals there don't have any money to invest, and we've done this on their behalf. So the way that we've structured that is unique in the fact that we're a C.I.C, so we can't be owned by any shareholders, and that the profits are solely for the charity Ambition Norwich Western. So there are different models to look at, I think, and I think one of the things that we need to look at as a sector, as community energy, is about how do we make sure those that are the poorest and most vulnerable in our society, particularly young people now that are disenfranchised with the price of house renting and so on, how can we make sure that they are actively involved and benefiting from new renewable energy infrastructure, so there's a just energy transition.
Yeah, Yeah, thank you. It's interesting from what Erin was saying about how important community engagement is. I remember reading the government's guidance on community engagement and benefit, and a number of quotes in there from developers saying, we did it, we didn't know we should, and it was the best first step we could possibly have made. So if you want a successful project, you need the community on side. Brilliant. I'm now just checking the time. We've got officially 7 minutes. So I will ask questions that have come in the chat. If you have others, please do raise a Zoom hand or stick them in the chat, and I'll try and keep an eye on that too. So questions during Charles and Dave's presentation. What were the priorities? Was connection to the grid a first priority? It's reputedly very difficult, and it was noted that your PPA negotiations were very late. How did you get finance without knowing what the return would be? Tell us about those two elements.
I'll talk to the grid first of all. This is I'll stop video again. We made a grid application very early on, and there were, at the time, there was a long queue, and we were going to be very disadvantaged by that. However, by the time, by getting in the door early and getting into a queue, we found that by the time we were in contract, effectively we were at the top of the queue. So we're very fortunate. It is an important first step to take. David.
Yeah, thank you, Charles. So yeah, just confirming that we did also explore other routes to connection, which is one of the things you have to do really if you can't get connection. That's particularly relevant now, given the constraints of national grid of 1 megawatt upstream. So yes, that's another thing to lobby your MP about, is getting Ofgem to encourage that infrastructure to be invested in now, so that more renewable energy can be onto the grid sooner. But yeah, with regards to the PPA, what we had at the outset was a model which relied on long-term off-takers, which I can't go into the commercials of right now, but long-term off-takers that were prepared to pay a premium for the energy that we were offering effectively, which helped us to model our project from day one and investment for development finance. But obviously, as time's gone on, the PPA price has been very high lately, and so we've got a fixed PPA for the next couple of years. We are looking for a corporate PPA, most likely at the end of that 2 years. Thank you.
Thanks very much. And in terms of other financing, did you say £1 million came from the council? And you also had money from the Urban Community Energy Fund at the very beginning. Can you just break?
Yes. So yes, there's two. Well, there's a few different things there. So first of all, the development finance. Yes, we had development finance, 20,000 from DEC as it was then, and then we had a £78,000 loan from Bristol City Council via DEC again through their community energy programme that DEC funded Bristol City Council to do. And that was an at-risk loan, effectively not to be repaid if we weren't successful in delivering and operating a turbine. So we'll be paying that back later this year. And then following that, it was stitching together various capital grants that we had to then convince them to turn that into development loan. So that's 100,000. I'll come on to capital in a moment, Charles. So yes, so those were the development elements, which were grant funded for 50,000 from Power to Change for a sandbox program. But then we had to quite quickly be creative, and we involved Bristol and Bath Regional Capital, which have funding from Bristol City Council through city funds to invest in social projects, and again, persuading them to allow development finance was a key part to achieving the planning application and post-planning application. So that's a development finance. Then there's a separate matter, which is your junior debt, And again, that was where city funds and other private investors and merchant venturers in Bristol, some individuals from there. But also we were supported by the ERDF, the last European money, basically £500,000 from the Low Carbon Challenge Fund, which is and that was £500,000 grant there. And then the remainder was Thrive Renewables last year, around this time last year. Following due diligence, they lent a further £4 million. So overall, it's a £6 million project, £500,000 of which was the planning development stage.
Wow, well done. Yeah, what a portfolio. Just in terms of local benefit, well, no, actually, I'm going to move on from Bristol, I think. John apparently said, I missed it, that costs are going up. Could you explain that very briefly, John?
Yeah, I think I did notice that in the chat actually. Yeah, so thanks for raising that one. When we go back over financial models, when we are revisiting what has gone before and looking at balance of plant costs, the cost of just the materials and labour to deliver, given that costs are rising generally, then probably now it would cost us marginally more to build the turbines than it cost us back in 2014, 2015. That was the reference I was making.
Okay, yeah, and that's just inflation and materials and engine costs and so on.
It is 7, 8 years ago that we were delivering those single turbines, so things will have moved up in price. I think interestingly, when we check turbine pricing, actually, that's been fairly consistent, but the cost of actually delivering the sites will have increased, not insignificantly, I think.
Brilliant. There was a question from Kayla about providing a discount to the community on electricity, but I think that's something that we should ask for more detail from Erin about and write a page on how we do that, a briefing for the sector for ongoing stuff. And there's an interesting question about changes in climate. Is it possible that you build a site, you build a turbine on a windy site and the wind disappears because of climate change, or is the reverse possible? Does anybody have a view? I know that Westmill, the wind speeds are lower than predicted.
This is Charles at C Community Power Solutions. It's a very complex question, and the answer is probably that the climate scientists are predicting more chaotic and higher extremes. That will shift the statistical distribution of wind speed to the right-hand end, which might mean, I think in the process of development, you're talking about a few years, in the process of turbine lifetime of 30 years, that ought to be perhaps a consideration if you're in a marginal site, particularly if you're picking a turbine of a lower wind class. It isn't that simple, but it's certainly worth considering. And my guess, and it would be complete guess, is that the extremes will increase in frequency. So that will affect strength, the probability of high winds and extremes, which determines probably the highest loads on the turbine.
Brilliant. Thank you, everybody. There are other questions which are too interesting to ignore, so we will try and answer them in a feedback email. We're now going to take a 10-minute break, or rather a 9 or an 8.5-minute break. So if you could be back at 11 minutes past 1 o'clock to go into the breakout rooms, that would be appreciated. Thank you very much to everybody who's participated so far, and some great questions. See you at 11 minutes past 1. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. I hope you're all teed up for the discussion. Now we'll be moving into breakout rooms for facilitated discussions. On the screen now is the list of the 3 groups and our assigned facilitators for each room. You're welcome to join any room you wish, depending on your expected scale of involvement in onshore wind. Small scale up to 50 kilowatts, mid scale up to 3 megawatts, large scale 3 megawatts upwards, including wind farms. Feel free to change rooms if you want to, but if you do, please remember that you'll be joining an ongoing discussion. Please put up your virtual hand to indicate that you want to speak, and use the reactions menu or the dots by your name at the top of the participant list to participate virtually. Kim will now open the breakout rooms, and on your screen you should be able to click and enter the breakout room of your choice. But before you do, the questions we want to be discussing are: what questions have not been answered for you in discussion? And this is, I think the facilitators may prioritize the people with real wind plans rather than just questions of interest, general interest. What resources or help do you think would be most useful in helping you move towards developing a wind project at this size? And do we need a community wind working group to guide or continue exploration and share knowledge? Would you want to join it? When you're thinking about resources and help, think both for the sector and what Community Energy England should specifically be doing. Okay, I think we can now put up the join the rooms thing, and we'll see you in 30 minutes. Kim will give facilitators a 5-minute warning, and then we'll reconvene here for feedback from each group. So if the conveners would take notes appropriate to giving the highlights in about 3 minutes when we rejoin. Great. Breakout rooms are now opening, so please make your choice and join what you feel is most relevant and useful.
But because the written ministerial statement has been put down, so they're being picked up again. It's great to see the DNO in the Northwest supporting that through grant funding. The Devon community were saying how they've got a similar site near Totnes, which but they can't get any development finance. And we also discussed about Somerset looking at a cross region area for sites suitable for wind, but we're also saying that start this process now because it takes a long time to get planning. Don't wait for it to be in your local plan to be named. And then we discussed about grid connection, the fact that upstream 1 megawatt curtailment is a real thing right now. And so Erin and her colleague were talking about a potential of looking at off-grid solutions such as hydrogen and energy local models in the Devon area. So really creative responses to constrained political environment, which is effectively a political decisions. So we're all urging in our groups each other to contact our MPs to get Ofgem to actually put some teeth into the DNOs and the national grid to require those reinforcements so that we can update our grid with renewable energy. So that was a hard, it's a hard line for those things, and to support evidence by going to the DNOs by demonstrating which sites are looking to be connected, and that helps the DNOs go to national to Ofgem and ask of national grid. So lastly, it's just making sure that you're engaging your MPs about the Shared Prosperity Fund, that there's a segment there for community energy, that this is a growth and regeneration strategy to have renewable energy, and that Shared Prosperity Fund replaces the European development finance that we've got for our turbines. So those are just some key takeaways, really, is just to engage and engage your local landowners and public to get stuff done now. Thank you.
You're on mute, Duncan.
Rookie error. That's a slogan. Engage, engage, engage. Thank you very much. And now, who was John? You were facilitating mid-scale, weren't you? Can you lead off?
Yeah, thank you. Very good discussion in that group. We did pick up on private wire and connection behind the meter as an unanswered question, so there was a bit of discussion around that. Pipeline, John in East Yorkshire, Rob in Shropshire and Telford, and we had Anna from Cornwall, all with actively engaged in trying to push projects forward. We talked about those. Kayla also had a live project that she brought to our attention. And I think we sort of ran out of time on the discussion, but in closing, there was definitely interest in picking up the momentum from here, and the thought of sharing resources, maybe getting some common understanding about what RSPB National Trust's position are on wind and renewable energy development would be helpful, and some kind of support through CE would be welcome, was the gist of what came out of that group.
Brilliant.
I think, and one last point actually, I think it came up in the chat. Kayla mentioned, can we? There's a resource of existing community energy projects which are delivering benefits. So when an opposition group might say there's no benefit to community energy, we can demonstrate that, and that happens in a broader sense. But maybe there are specific wind energy case studies that could be shared around.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Lovely. And
sometimes we just on the National Trust, I think it's important to engage just members of the National Trust, because I don't necessarily believe that the trustees of National Trust are supportive of onshore wind, and perhaps we should see could identify that as an issue and perhaps write to the board of trustees and ask them their view, because their members might have a different view.
yeah, National Trust globally is very supportive of renewables. Not quite sure the position on onshore wind so much. Okay, and then the small group, we talked about where applications might be and what is permitted and what is permitted development, and permitted development is mostly too small, but the farming industry is definitely interested, and as a model for behind the wire project, it becomes much more potentially viable to do the small scale stuff, which obviously is more costly, but with good revenue it's possible. Also, there are tax breaks for companies under the recent budget, so that might be grounds for talking to companies about doing joint projects. Issues about what technologies work at small scales. Sydney Charles has done some research, and we will share that in the follow-up email. And resources that people would like is good wind speed data. Some of the currently available is not necessarily reliable, and Bob Sherman mentioned that they're doing a test, so they're going to stick an anemometer on a pole, and he will own that, so that might become a resource for that can be hired out to other community organizations to double check your wind speed for smaller projects. Information around permitting, what is permitted and what isn't, information around environmental factors like birds and bats, which are more affected by smaller scale stuff. Just to say on the wind speed stuff, we are producing a map which will come out in June, July, which will have more accurate wind speed data, but again, needs checking. Richard shared a global, a World Bank wind atlas, which we will put in the follow-up email too, which looks useful. Suggestions for other support: to crowdsource a list from the community energy sector of recommended suppliers who can deliver different services that we need in the development phase, and possibly also the build out. Look into the possibility of second-hand wind turbines, which in this era of repowering will become more available. To build that potentially, to build the John's checklist into something more detailed, which we can add to. Again, we will start that. a list of example small scale projects, and so that we can more easily pin down the potential. Considerable interest in a wind group, which might then lead into peer support networks for people doing projects at different scales. So lots of stuff for us to think about and do in there. Thank you, everybody. We now have a very few minutes left, which I will use to try and pull a few things together. If you are interested in there being a wind group and would be interested in being on it, maybe stick your name and that wind group yes in the chat, and we will definitely circle back to you. It feels to me like there is a will for not too frequent meeting up around this issue. There's a list of resources that we can start pulling together. We will consult you on prioritizing that. Work to be done in connecting with the DNOs around connection and showing them that there is a demand, and working on prioritizing, being able to prioritize community projects, and also work around engagement. We will make sure that our draft letter to MPs is up to date and takes your points into account so that they can be advocating on our behalf for a future with community wind in it. Work around the private wire behind the meter projects and viability of those, to answer some of those unanswered questions, maybe get examples of projects that are actually happening around that, and sharing resources. And a resource on community benefits. I think that's a no-brainer. It's a really important area where we can argue the importance and validity of community energy. And now, a big thank you to everybody, to all our speakers and facilitators for taking the time to participate today and sharing their thoughts, and to our sponsors, Renantis, who've made this event possible, and to all of you who've come and asked brilliant questions and contributed in the discussion groups. Any resources that have been shared during the event will be made available afterwards. Keep an eye out for an email from us with all that information. And again, thank you. There will be a poll survey question going up any second, an exit poll. And we'd love your feedback. So with that, with a minute to spare, or maybe only 30 seconds, again, thank you. We won't close the Zoom straight away. So if you want to carry on chatting in the chat, please do, or even verbally. The poll is up.
Just while people are filling in the poll, Bristol Energy Network will be hosting a community energy event on the 24th of June, the last day of Community Energy Fortnight in Bristol, our energy transition event, where we'll be celebrating our turbine actually being commissioned, and also our new project, the C.I.C project, Sustainable Innovative Financial Foundations for Turbines, which is looking at 10 sites. So come look out for Community Energy for details on that.
Dave, the 10 projects have got to be in the West of England area. That's correct, isn't it?
That's right. But we believe we've got a model for the nation potentially once there's changes politically.
Have you got a short list of 10, or if people are in that area, can they still come forward?
I'd say do Bristol Energy Network and Community Power Solutions are leading on this project. So do drop me an email to my Bristol Energy Network email address if you've got a site that you'd like us to explore, or if you've got a landowner that you'd like us to engage with. We'll be working with the combined authority and the local authority leads to look at that beginning of April.
Brilliant. Will you share your project at bristolenergynetwork.org email in the chat, please, Dave? Thank you very much. And it's so great to have a project showing the way. I believe you'll be live in April.
It's probable that they will start commissioning next week. It'll take 3 weeks to get through the commissioning, and then there's a 10-day test period. Then there's a 3-day maintenance sort of first MOT, and then we're off and running.
Do give us some notice of the actual D-Day, and we will all raise a glass. And maybe even shout about it. You never know.
Well, come along to our event, and that's the right place to raise a glass. I think that's when we'll be ready for everyone.
24th of June, we'll be there.
That's the one.
That's Dave's email in the chat. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Duncan.
Thank
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
I'm doing all you can still do it now.
That's lovely. Doing still.
Thanks, everybody. That was really great.